Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated. This is Polymath Robotics' weekly podcast where we never miss a single week, not even when Ilia is in Toronto, rudely, and I'm in upstate New York before then, where we talk about robots, how to make robots, how much we love robots, and then issues in robotics. Sitting across from me is a man who's wearing a shirt that will not again get me into a recursive loop. I've learned, I've had a software update, and that will never happen again. Ilia, what's your deal?
Specifically to this episode or generally in life?
Well, a little bit A, a little bit of B.
A little bit of A, a little bit of B.
Yeah.
It is very hot.
Are you a grabby alien?
Absolutely. That's what I hope humanity becomes.
While we were waiting for the recording device to start working, we were arguing about the Fermi paradox.
Yeah.
Is it the Fermi paradox or Fermi's paradox?
The Fermi paradox, I think. 80% sure on that one.
We gotta find Fermi and send
Great YouTube video people want to see, unrelated to robots.
Yeah.
Called
Could be related to robots. Given that you just talked about self-replicating probes colonizing other planets.
Yeah.
Long story short.
Why Grabby Aliens Explain Human Earliness. Great paper, great series of videos.
Long story short, I think Fermi's paradox can be answered with the lack of a profit motive in colonizing other planets with slower than light travel. But that's a whole debate for another podcast that we don't record.
Shocker. The CEO cannot see the world outside of the frame of capitalism.
I mean, we haven't colonized Antarctica.
Shocker.
Elliot, what are we going to talk about this week?
We are going to talk about why building a more general purpose robotics team is interesting and different than building a application specific full stack team.
Or more specifically, how building vertical is a way different thing than people quite understand, especially on the outside. But before that, we're going to play our game. So there's our great sound effect that everyone's been waiting for all week. This is our game where we come up with a robot by drawing a random card of a piece of technology and a use case where we have to deploy it. Ilia got tired of our cards being tired because we feel like we've gone through them all before. So he tried asking ChatGPT for some industries. Ilia, what industries did ChatGPT suggest?
It's just very vague. It was like, exploration, healthcare. And when I tried to get it to be a little bit more specific, it just repeated the same ones back to me.
Okay, so
good on you, ChatGPT.
So what's in your internal LLM? Tell us to talk about.
All right. Well, first, technology or application?
Technology.
All right. Technology. Let's go with predictive maintenance algorithm. That's
not a robotics technology.
Well, why not?
That's a general like IoT cheapo thing, but sure.
Let's see.
This is going to lead to very uninteresting. We're going to talk about algorithms that tell you when your coffee machine needs to be cleaned. Woohoo! Welcome to Automated.
I think it depends on...
Best podcast ever. I'm learning about robotics.
I think I'm going to go with, for application, Ring security robots.
What?
Here's what's going to be. It's going to fly around your house.
Why is Ring security robots an application?
Ask ChatGPT. I'm looking at the list it gave
seriously?
me. Yeah, seriously. It's listed.
This is an application.
The other one is
it's Ring,
concrete.
the Amazon subsidiary that makes doorbells.
Yep.
That has talked about having little drones to fly around your house that seem to not exist.
ChatGPT is, we're big on LLMs here at Polymath Robotics.
We're always learning.
So we are, as many other well-funded startups, directly using the output of a ChatGPT without doing any effort to sanity check it.
Ilia is a ChatGPT rapper.
Exactly. In both senses of the term.
I'm not just talking about his terrible music.
Exactly. The general application it gave is domestic assistance, and under domestic assistance, it listed Ring security robots.
Well, let's talk about domestic assistance and predictive maintenance. And let's add a robot, ideally a humanoid. So I have a whole bunch of stuff around my house.
All right.
I have some Samsung TVs. I definitely don't have any Samsung washer dryers because everyone says they're terrible. The Reddit is super anti-Samsung appliances.
I was going to defend them, and then I remembered mine are LG. And
I have Maytag washer dryer. I got a GE stove, and then I have 48,000 Sonos speakers and Google Wi-Fi. These things break at modes that are relatively unpredictable to me, and when they break or when they stop functioning, sometimes I need to go into an app. Sometimes I need to debug things. Like my dryer, as Ilia predicted, has started squeaking again because I opened it up and I sprayed WD-40 instead of a better lubricant.
Pro tip for all the young roboticists out there. WD-40 is not a lubricant. It's a penetrant. Very different applications.
Yeah, if you didn't know that, you're an idiot.
No. It's just WD-40 helps you get stuff that's seized unseized. It's not intended to keep stuff lubricated over time.
So I think the robot to talk through is a robot that can interface with nearly anything, R2D2, and do preventative maintenance on it, whether it's spraying some lubricant, whether it is debugging my stove. I used to have this stove before we replaced it that like couldn't turn off in certain states, and you had to like pull the power out of the wall while the oven was on.
Quality manufacturing.
So maybe it can like pull the power out of a wall. And then maybe it can also like go into an app and like, you know, reset my Google Wi-Fi or make sure my Sonos is on Sonos Net after a terrible app update. Maybe, you know, do things, some things like that. So to start off with, it needs AGI, but that's a small inconvenience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's R2D2 for the home.
Exactly. And just like, you know, in the best Star Wars movie, the first one, episode 1, just stoking the hate mail for user interaction or for listener interaction. You know, there's this scene where they're trying to get away, I think, or maybe it was in the second one. Anyway, and there's their ship is getting fired on. These little robots run out and start fixing anything. They're getting blown off the hull as they're running away. That's what you need to imagine, except with children. Yeah. Except where the robot's trying to fix something and the kid's just climbing all over the robot.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're thinking about like an R2D2, I think like you have a mobile base, like so indoor localization, yeah, solve that, whatever, NBD. But realistically, if you had a relatively good LLM plus some ever expanding list of applets to debug different things that are maybe like open source, it could like realize, oh, something's going wrong with the Sonos speakers because it's supposed to be playing everywhere, but the music's cutting out, and like go suggest changes or something. Our local R2D2 Astro is making noises that no one asked for. I think like that's like reasonable to do, like, you know, tier 0.5 fixes.
So yeah.
But that's just like a local computer.
I would just love if, so the robot, it's a humanoid, of course, because that's the...
I think R2D2 is now, I now like that.
No. If you want to get it funded right now, Stefan, it has to be a humanoid. Yeah. All right. We'll do the move that this other company did where they started with wheels and arms, and they said, don't worry, we'll replace the wheels later with legs, and then never did. So it's driving around, and of course, the other hotness is LLMs and those sort of things. So we don't teach it what to do. We expect it to just learn it on its own. I know who you're making fun of, but I do think if you scanned my phone, you could probably get a sense of what the 15 major things in my house are. No. Do the opposite. It wanders the space and it tries to image recognize exactly what brand and model of fridge you have. Because famously, looking at a fridge, you can tell them apart. I mean, if you can open the fridge, there should be a scannable thing. Somewhere on there should be a serial number. Yeah. So step 1, the thing roves around randomly opening and closing doors on all your appliances for about a week until it can find all the serial numbers. Because it has to charge every 10 minutes because it's a humanoid. Once it has cataloged all your appliances. You're supposed to be less bitter than this when you come back from vacation. I should have you know. I'm not bitter. I'm poking fun. Once it does that, the second thing it will do, it will automatically register you for those fake manufacturer warranty things that get you spammed with a million things. Yep. I get a letter from GE about our whatever every 3 weeks. Yeah. I don't know why the free warranty requires so much paperwork. Yeah, exactly. And then when it finds you have not kept up with your warranty, it summarily executes you. Cool. So it knows what appliances you have. Yep. It's found their serial numbers. It now can do what? Figure out how they're supposed to operate. Figure out if they're not working and do the lowest level effort to fix it. Okay. How does it know they're not working? Because comparatively speaking, finding serial numbers is much more straightforward than figuring out if an appliance is not working. So I live in an old house with plaster walls. Underneath the plaster is essentially a Faraday cage. So I have terrible networking in my house. To the point where Ilia has come to my house to try to make my internet better because I was messing up phone calls too much. It turned out to be Stefan needed to restart his MacBook. That was the actual root cause, but that's a different question. Macs just work. Alongside this Faraday cage, my Sonos speakers will sometimes cut in and out. Like if I'm trying to play music through 15 speakers at the same time, a real use case, some of them will drop in and rejoin and drop in and rejoin, probably because of network connectivity. You could listen to that. That's the thing that you could know if you're scanning the app. If you can associate the rooms if in the app with the rooms in the real space hard, you could know that there's supposed to be music in this room and there's no music.
So there's a failure.
My more worrying thing is, how does it actually know what the app is supposed to do? Are you giving it your phone, or are you running a copy of your OS on this home? So Apple's supposed to sign off on running an Apple
logging.
emulator.
Sonos, for example, has web clients, has a bunch of things. So it could be running the Sonos like web app and like seeing what's going on there.
So, side note, have you followed any of the stuff with the Rabbit or the Humane Pen or any of those like new AI assistants?
Which level of how terrible they are stuff?
Yeah. Have you followed any of it?
Yes.
So I forget which one, but it doesn't really matter. Both of them probably promise kind of AI to integrate with apps, exactly what you're describing. And it turns out, digging into it, and a bunch of people have done this now, that it's just a bunch of process automation where they've hard coded to go into Spotify and click certain buttons and whatever. Just great. I think you could make, if it was like a marketplace where people could make little applets for like, hit the restart button on my Google Wi-Fi, your little R2D2 could do that. Now, why you need a robot, questionable, but like you could theoretically have a thing going around. I think all this software stuff, as we've well heard, the human world is designed for humans. So why go about this clunky software way? Why not just have the robot walk over to you and ask for your cell phone and unlock it and then go into your apps and figure out what's going wrong? Right. So for Apple, especially for Face ID, this humanoid has to have like a scary skin mask of you to unlock your phone. Ideally, one that's a screen that can auto update for whether it wants to access my phone or my wife's phone. Well, but the face unlock on Apple at least looks for depth as well. So it can't just be a screen. It has to be like a full live 3D print thing. Yeah, a live ghoulish mask. So, the least scary thing you'd find at night is a robot coming at you wearing your face with its hand held out for your phone while you're sleeping. Because it needs to check up on something. It makes sense, to steal your phone while you're asleep to check up on something. My oven's working properly. Exactly. Because I haven't looked at my extended warranty. Stefan, it is 2 a.m. Historically speaking, you get up at 3 to make yourself Hot Pockets. If I do not check, your Hot Pockets will be cold. Give me your phone. I think we're descending a little bit too much into La La Land here. That's the opposite of the problem we usually have. Yeah. Preventative maintenance. Yeah. There's a couple of ideas of ways that we do this game today where we're talking too much crap on companies that we've heard about in the last 2 weeks, including robots that fall out of your backpack when you fall off a turbine. Please. Okay. Digression time. Please tell the story, Stefan. I think we should just restart the game and just do that. No. Let's just tell the story. So I saw a video on LinkedIn today where a guy falls off a wind turbine. To be clear, not a real person. This is an animation of a scenario. They were in a really ugly, clunky backpack. They start falling, hands waving in the air. Backpack pops open and a quadcopter comes out of the backpack to fly them to safety. This is talked about as a real product where some trade show somewhere with Japanese text was offering this backpack for sale. Because there aren't enough technologies to stop people's quick descent from high surfaces. Like ropes don't work. Parachutes, who's heard of them? Let's make quadcopters swing 30-inch blades inches away from your neck. Yeah. That's the way to safety. I mean, to be fair, parachutes won't work at that height. They need a minimum height for them to unfurl. So I feel like you could have rocket-powered parachutes that unfurl better. You could have all sorts of that kind of stuff. You could, in fact, have a backpack with rockets in it that just shoot you up into the air so that you're now at a safe height for parachutes. Well, that's actually what the ejector seats on fighter planes do exactly that, even when you're stationary. With ejector seats. Yeah, just have a little ejector seat on your back. But actually, we saw it's actually why we don't have a lot of guests in the show. We have guests try to come on the show, and then I don't like their game, so boom, eject them out the skylight. Exactly. We did see another product, which again, a backpack, but it inflates into this like rigid sort of parachute, but sort of cushion. Like think like bouncy castle, but parachute shape. Yep. And that was live tested on live humans a bunch of times, and like that is a real solution. Yeah. Quad rotor, not so much. So going back to our robot that does preventative maintenance in my house. So humanoid walking around with your face, stealing your phone to check that your appliances are working correctly. It is now identified that your Sonos speaker is disconnecting. Also another way you could do this is just a bunch of scraping tools that look at the apps I connect to. Yeah. A Amex Black card
that's ideally paid for by someone else. A little bit of identity theft. Some monitors that judge my electricity usage. And if it ever thinks any of my electrical appliances are acting wrong, it just buys me a new one.
Yeah, exactly.
And if my Wi-Fi is wrong, it just buys me new Google Wi-Fi, or sends it off to some help desk in India to debug.
I'm sure. So
and gives remote access to my internet for it, and that feels cheaper and easier and probably more secure.
As it wanders around, it realizes that Sonos number 7 is not working well because it's just far enough away from the Wi-Fi. But instead of moving the Sonos, it just punches a hole through the wall to provide
Faraday
better
cage unblocked.
Yeah. There you go. Automated preventive maintenance. That's right. This is supposed to be preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
So what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to watch you use your stove and then tell you that if you used your stove less, you would have to replace it less often.
And it stops anyone from using the stove too often.
It's like the paperclip machine all over again.
So I think we have I think we just call this company Figure.
Oh, jeez. Too brutal. Oh, man.
I mean, preventative maintenance bot 3000.
Yeah. I think this one is the unterminator. It prevents your appliances from dying.
The preventinator. So that being said, a thing I've been talking about with a couple of people in the last couple of weeks is just how different a vertical robotics company is from really any other sort of startup or company. And maybe to expand on that a little bit, or actually maybe Ilia, you want to talk through like what's a horizontal company? What's a vertical company? Like
Yeah. So using my own definitions in our space, in the robotics space, or vertical company is somebody that or a group that's trying to target a very specific market. So we are going to, we were talking earlier about scanning store shelves for restocking.
Yep.
So we're going to purpose build a robot that is built to go down standard aisles on flat floors in normal commercial spaces just to scan for stocking. That's all we're going to do. We might expand to other products in the future, but we're just going to do this one thing. And we're going to do everything from the user interface to the hardware, to the software, to the sales, to all of it.
And if it doesn't work well, we'll show it up and do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So that you have things stocked on time.
We are both the manufacturer and the vendor.
We are stocking as a service.
Yeah. Yeah. So
not to be confused with stalking as a service. That's a whole different company.
That's called Apple. But no, so the benefit of that business model is that you control your own destiny as a company. So there's nobody to blame but yourself if your robot's not working well.
Yep.
And the benefit to your clients is that they have one group to work with and they don't have to worry about the complexity of the robot. They just pay you some money and robot does useful work.
Yep. They've decided they care about stocking shelves. They spend money and shelves are stocked.
Or at least you know that the shelves are not stocked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very amenable to the...
Our Astro is going wild.
Very talkative today.
It started targeting our interns and junior employees and senior employees.
So that's very amenable to a robot as a service business model, right?
And like a way that I describe this as well for what we did at Starsky is we knew that robots were hard. So we figured we had to be in control of every other part of the stack besides other people on the road. So we would own all the hardware. We would own the maintenance schedules of the vehicles. We'd be able to choose the exact routes it drove on so that we had a fighting chance of actually making a truck drive with no person in it.
And it's very tempting as a robotics company to build a vertical company because it's such a hard problem that any piece that you don't directly control is likely to kill you.
Yep.
Right. So, you don't trust a camera vendor, they're late, whatever. All of it has knock-on effects. Because it's such a tightly integrated space and because it's so cutting edge, it's more sensitive to that than practically anything else. And
I would actually argue, like, for most people should be building vertical robotics companies. Like that's the main way that most companies, most robotics problems can be solved today. But I think there's a specific set of trade-offs that most people, including myself, like to hand wave away. And Ilia just spilled a beverage of an adult nature all over his Polymath podcast shirt.
It's now beer flavored.
Yep. But whereas what we're building at Polymath and what other companies who are doing just sensors or just the perception stack are doing are a lot more horizontal, where they're doing one specific layer and trying to deploy that across a series of verticals.
Yeah. And functionally what that means is you get to be more targeted to what you're doing. So we're generally not worried about our hardware.
Yep.
We don't really have electrical engineers. We don't really have mechanical engineers. And so the layers that we do target get a lot more effort.
Yep.
So for comparison, any robotics organization I've been a part of or worked with might number in the tens or hundreds of people, but out of that, maybe 1% is actually working on autonomy.
Yep.
Because it's just one piece of the puzzle.
And I think a thing that people don't understand about the difference between that and vertical is kind of at Polymath, we've been able to build one sort of culture, one sort of team. We have kind of like fundamentally, there are differences between people who go to school for electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, software engineering.
Electrical engineering is just better.
But those differences are one thing if you're just a robotics company in general. And then it gets even bigger when you start to have truck drivers, to the point where during Starsky days, I sometimes thought of us as like single-handedly, like optimistically, as single-handedly saving the world, because like, hey, we were taking, people who thought Trump was too liberal and people who thought Bernie was too conservative and making them work together. And there's a lot of cool things about that, but it's a very particular flavor of culture you got to build to have an organization like that. So like we would have stuff like we had to treat different members of the team differently, which is like kind of anathema to a lot of Silicon Valley ethos, where like we had like different benefits packages for truck drivers than for engineers, because Silicon Valley engineers have one set of expectations on like what their health insurance package looks like. And the brutal economics of running a trucking company has a very different allowance for health insurance for them, such to the point that I remember a very pro-Obamacare member of my team complaining that Obamacare was ruining our unit economics on truck drivers, and like kind of having existential dread with that realization.
Yeah. And I mean, even organizationally, culturally, but how does that impact your end product, did you find?
I mean, I think there's a lot of communication stuff that has to be managed specifically. Like an example I always call out is we learned to only have a subset of our truck drivers on Slack. One of them saw on Slack a birthday celebration for someone on the team, and this driver was like out on the road hauling freight and like needed to be talked to for an hour about the fact that like no one bought them a birthday cake. And like buying a birthday cake and shipping it to a truck stop is really hard, especially with like 50 drivers out traveling across the country all the time. Theoretically, you could do it, but like we did not. It seemed too hard for what it was worth. But also, like, if you don't do those sorts of little happy morale things for members of your team, people are upset in San Francisco. Like, I'd have that type of conversation on one side and like engineers being upset that we didn't have an espresso machine in the office on the other.
You didn't make that mistake the second time.
Yeah,
right?
now we have an espresso machine. Oh, yeah. We got a fancy espresso machine. We have arcade games in the office. Yeah.
Come work for Polymath. Anyway.
But like, I mean, like Ilia, you've had the chance to work in, teams that are generally just roboticists for most of your career. How's that? What's like communication and team stuff been like there as opposed to what you imagine a more vertical thing is?
Well, concretely, I think a really good example is when I went to deploy some ClearPath robots at a natural gas plant in Australia. Mm-hmm. So this was a large Australian natural gas energy company. They had a bunch of subset initiatives in autonomy and improving efficiency, so on and so on. So they internally had engineers that they had hired to run these projects, and ClearPath was helping them out. Visiting on site on these gas plants, you're working with technicians and engineers who are working gas plants, which are still very educated, very trained, very specialized people, but not general roboticists.
Yeah.
And so already the cultural shift of working with the deployed robotics team on site with some pretty rough folk, rough technicians was an interesting mix.
Yep.
Everybody was super good natured about it. They tried to support us, but our goals are we're so fundamentally misaligned, where their interest is following process to get through the day, to get the product out the door. And that should be their goal, right? Like ultimately. Whereas an engineering team or an R&D's team is, how do we change the process to be more efficient?
Yeah.
For example, right? Or what new thing, it's ultimately...
How should the rules be changed as opposed to how do I follow the rules?
Exactly. Can we make it safer? Yep. Can we make it more efficient? Can we, faster? And so you get this pretty serious push and pull of outlook on life to say, once you've worked enough, where, and it's funny, as a person, my wife will often accuse me, why do you always have to mess with things?
Yeah.
Every time we do something, you have to mess with it and try to change it a little bit. And that's almost an ethos of a lot of engineering types that I've talked with, especially again in robotics, which is very early in its infancy as an industry, where there's a lot of space to try and experiment and play with things. There's not perfect solutions to everything. And I think that ethos and design can be found outside of the discipline, but it's much more rare.
I mean, I also think if rules exist in facilities like that for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and like if you add a bolt the wrong place, if you walk the wrong path from A to B, you might die. You might kill someone else. You might lead to a time loss accident at a minimum. Like it's just fundamentally different than the like, hey, smart guy, why don't you figure out how to make this thing be better? Like I remember like early days at Starsky, should be careful about how I phrase this one. I personally do not think smoking marijuana is the worst thing in the world. Now, federally, to have a commercial driver's license to drive a truck, you need to be able to pass a drug test. Drug tests can pick up marijuana. Funny enough, don't pick up meth. So you can basically have a CDL. Because
marijuana slows down deliveries.
You can theoretically have a CDL, smoke meth every day, but not if occasionally you have a gummy to go to sleep. So I said a version of the spiel to an early person who was working with us. And then when I realized, oh no, us as a trucking company, we need to turn in our drug tests from our drivers on a regular basis, told someone on the team they needed to pass a drug test, and they made themselves rather scarce afterwards and acted like I was coming after them. And it was just personally, it didn't seem like a problem to me if when you're not driving, you've had a gummy or two, but was literally the company cannot function with that change in rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a good saying that regulations are written in blood, in that there's very, very good reasons for this stuff.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, right? Yeah. But
I'm pretty sure methed out truck drivers have hurt more people than folks who have gummies at night.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm confident that one.
I think per capita, maybe. I think there's less meth users than weed users on the planet. But anyway, we'll neither here nor there. But that being said, and again, coming back to a concrete example, when we were
on also funny, a lot of my engineers would be like, oh yeah, I'd like to get a CDL. That'd be real cool. And I'd be like, yeah, so just by the way, San Francisco-based engineer, to get a CDL, you have to pass a drug test. And no one would ever want to talk to me about that afterwards. And I'll have to randomly drug test you every 3 to 6 months. Let me know when you get your CDL.
and from the flip side, the technicians and operators on site were kind of having to babysit us a little bit because there was a lot of very dangerous equipment.
Yeah.
And at one point we sent a robot into a gas power plant turbine to inspect it and didn't realize that the inside of this room where humans are supposed to operate is 140, 150.
Jeez.
So the robot started melting. And there's lithium batteries on the robot. And so if it had spent a significant time there, it probably would have just caught on fire inside a volatile combustion chamber gas turbine. So, there's good reasons where some of the technicians were very upset with us after the robot came out smoking this gas turbine room. So, to be clear, I'm not trying to say that they're doing the wrong thing. They're doing absolutely the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. Following regulations is what you should be doing. But just the mentality of that and of doing that is going to be orthogonal to the mentality of developing things quickly and testing them out and trying to find new solutions and those sort of things.
I was talking to a robotics founder the other day who has a very much vertical operator, a robotics company that deals with dangerous stuff in close proximity. And something he belied, or I think belied is a real word, was the amount of safety warnings he has to put everywhere. And there's kind of this I'm a CTO of a startup. I'm smart. Do I really need a yellow sticker that there's a step here? Do I really need a yellow sticker that this thing can swing widely? Obviously, it swings widely. 100 people aren't working by this thing. It's the same 8 people. If you really don't know that it swings widely, I don't know, maybe you deserve to be hit by it. Which, to be clear, he did not say, or probably did not think. But I think there's this there's this broader, when you are trained to work in this like smart people outsmarting their way through hard problems environment that a lot of like the tech world is, the idea that you need all these stickers and you need to think about at this almost lowest common denominator starts to be very hard. It's a very hard context switch.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, and we are getting into a little bit of territory of questionable things here, but the best kind of organization will really try to push itself to, there's no internal us versus them. There's no personal us versus them. There's the really best organizations that are not even us as a company versus other companies.
Yep.
It's us making the world a better place, which is very utopian
Crunchy.
And all sorts of scary things. Not even crunchy, the other direction, the like scary utopian.
This thing that the word for it's dystopian.
Yeah, the see previous, unterminator roving your house with your face on it. Anyway, but I think that itself can be threatening to folks who have made their livelihood to follow a specific set of rules.
Yep.
And the idea of, well, now you're threatening my position. The things that you're bringing in, and we get this a lot and there's this concern, again, valid, that as we automate things, you're threatening the position and the way that things are done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's disruptive and scary to people. Mm-hmm. And I think that is another thing that I take somewhat for granted working in engineering discipline, where a lot of my colleagues...
They'll find something else for you.
Well, not only that, it's just a lot of my colleagues that doesn't even come to their mind. It's not even a question. It's always like, oh, you found a cool new thing? Cool. Let me try it out. Let me see how effective it is. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, no skin off my back. Nobody's going to come back and say, oh, you're an idiot for suggesting this.
I think there's another thing in here where, so at Starsky, we were also building's a strong word, adapting software for managing a trucking fleet. And the thing with like these high volume commodity industries is you really need people to do a lot of work quickly. So some of that is like nice UI, but some of that frankly is not moving the UI so that someone can kind of muscle memory, mouse to the top right when they're done with something, and then mouse to the middle left to type in this thing and mouse to the top right to finish something, and so on and so forth. Because if it takes you 45 minutes to log 10 bills of lading instead of 5 minutes, that's just 40 less minutes you have in your day for everything else. And now you're getting yelled at by someone for not doing the other things you're supposed to do in those other 40 minutes. So like even like minor UI updates people would feel were challenging their ability to do their job within the constraints that they had.
Yeah.
And I think like my net on being vertical versus being horizontal is managing teams who have to work in those sorts of conditions is fundamentally different than managing teams who have to like figure out novel ways to write safety certifiable code that could use machine learning to perceive lane markings. And that like, it's hard to do both of those things in one organization if your organization is less than a couple hundred or a couple thousand people.
Yeah. Unless you can segment it out to the point where it's a bunch of little organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I think the right way for robotics to be commercialized today is frankly through vertical companies. But I think those vertical companies, and part of why we're doing what we're doing at Polymath, those vertical companies cannot afford to build any part of the stack that isn't necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't, I wouldn't say can't, but it's very difficult, even if you are very focused to be a vertical company, to build everything in-house. The famous, like, no one person on the planet knows how a pencil is made.
Yeah.
Because like everything from mining the materials to construction to distribution to whatever, right? So you need support systems. And again, robotics being in its infancy means that very few of those exist today. And so that's another thing that makes it very challenging.
Yeah. So one of the most painful rejections we got at Starsky from an investor was like kind of like our last best chance for a Series B lead. And he'd invited us to a partner meeting. I had made a lot of happiness with my now wife by saying I was going to fly back from the middle of a European vacation to go to this partner meeting. And I had a phone call with him, I think in Spain or like in Ireland or something, where he was uninviting us from the partner meeting. And the rationale was that he looked at our unit economics. So we were, including all truck drivers, 100 people, including no truck drivers, 45 people, including only people in San Francisco, maybe like 35, 40 people. We had at that time no full-time finance person. Maybe we had hired a finance person like a month or two later, But like we had like a bookkeeper, and I had done and a MBA intern who was helping me on my models. And the reason why he decided to uninvite us from a partner meeting was that the unit economics of Starsky's trucking company were significantly worse than publicly traded trucking companies. And that was why we died. I mean, like that was why we died in that particular deal, because like our unit economics did not look good when you compared us against companies who could borrow at nearly zero to buy trucks, do clever amortization schedules, and have an effective way to resell those trucks to the market where it would minimize their capex. So as a result, I think we were paying something like 65 cents per mile for equipment because we were leasing it. And the big companies were paying like 45 cents a mile. And like the big companies could get like a 20 cent a gallon discount on diesel, whereas we could only get like a 10 cent a gallon discount on diesel. And like a whole big long list. Like the big companies might have gotten $2.25 to $2.50 per mile because they had a whole integrated sales team. We were only getting like $2 a mile because we were using brokers to find our distribution. And those are the reasons why, you know, the company that did the first driver out truck was unable to land that particular investor. And I think like being a vertical service is probably the best way to build a robotics company that sells to the actual end users. But like, if you're wasting time on like figuring out how to make a LiDAR work, you're done. Yeah. Like it's all just like operating software and like integration and then financial management and clever go to market.
Well, it's funny because you get as an entrepreneur or as a founder, you get this rug pull where your early VCs are like, yeah, humanoids or LLMs or robotics or whatever. Like great. Super exciting. You know, cool technology. And then you start to do your first few customers and you get this immediate flip of like, oh, well, you're nowhere near as efficient as your competitors.
Yeah.
What?
Not even your competitors, like the people you know, but like the big companies who have armies of CPAs to present their numbers.
And I mean, from a VC standpoint, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. From a VC standpoint, you know, there are usually generally perfect pure software companies that can come in and completely disrupt a market and just like sweep it away. Great. Fantastic. But in areas like robotics or more complex areas, you cannot be just so unbelievably better that nobody can even come close. Yeah, I mean, if that was the case,
as we said 1,000 times on this podcast, robots are often the worst way to do something.
Yeah.
So like if the pitch is robots are going to be the worst way to do something, and we're going to be the world's best company at doing mining surfaces, like, you know, one of your numbers is going to be bad, and it might be uptime and it might also be CAC.
Yeah. If it was so easy to do that with robots today, we would be just surrounded by robots just for everything. And we were talking earlier, you know, putting in my favorite topic here, maybe we'll catch this another time, is that like there's been a lot of companies that have died on sensors on wheels for like stock checking and shelves and security and whatever. And all of them have had trouble because like basically you can't do that trick with robots. Like sticking a robot in for restocking shelves does not save you a person restocking shelves.
Yeah, it's a really. It's funny. I was talking to I met a company the other day as well who did robot shelf restocking, and my mom, who claims she's listened to a couple episodes of the podcast, but none where we talked about indoor localization. I was like, well, how hard is it to localize yourself? Like, I mean, pretty hard. Like, how do you do that? Well, just use the sensors. Okay, there's no GPS. How do you use it? Like, okay, so that part's really hard. Well, like, you can just put stickers on the floor. Okay, how many stickers? And it was like an episode of this show, which resulted in, okay, so now you have a $20,000 robot. You have a sticker every 10 feet on the floor of the grocery store that if they get dirty, don't work. And you're replacing someone who costs maybe $20,000 a year. Congratulations, you've built a terrible business.
Yeah. And it's just that all the way down.
Yeah.
Right. And
like, to be honest, if you're going to do stock checking, probably more valuable than indoor localization, which is itself really hard, is like an integration with the automated reordering system for that grocery store, so that as you're driving around and you realize they've used 80% of their Cheerios, you automatically add X more units of Cheerios to the next order.
I mean, seriously, like, you know what's more valuable than the robot? A freaking backpack that your guys who work in the store just wear, just studded with cameras and a little network connection that just streams the video and figures out all that shit in the cloud.
Yeah.
There's no reason to put this on a robot.
Because actually, then you don't even need to know location. You just know, I only see 12 boxes of Cheerios.
Yeah, you don't care about localization.
We need 30 boxes of Cheerios.
I can depend on the human to mostly not knock into things. Or if they do, pick up the things they've knocked over and put them back.
Well, no, but I mean, like, you might need localization to be like, where on what shelf is what.
But you don't even care.
If everything has a sticker in front of it that says in barcode form what this is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Or you close the loop post fact and you do global slam because you know that the person didn't exit the store.
Yep.
Like there's some bounding. Anyway, the point being, the robot actually adds nothing to this.
Yeah.
It's like more intelligent stock tracking and better distribution systems and a better database and a better UI for that better database are like 90% of your value.
You know, another way that you could get this information, if you just look at what people buy.
People move stuff around a store.
Okay,
that's the
how
problem.
much? Enough? Probably not.
Yeah, a lot. Abandoned items and carts and stuff are like cause
what
just havoc.
What percentage of all things in a grocery store are abandoned right now?
Also shocking. I know for a capitalist. Sometimes people steal things.
That's why you surround the grocery store with a minefield.
Spoilage and theft and loss is like real things.
Yeah, but my point being, like, the way that the grocery industry is largely going to buy robots is from someone who's willing to do
all of this
shelf stocking as a service.
Yeah,
but like if you create that backpack, or if you're selling that backpack, you really shouldn't be hiring an EE team to integrate it together. You really should just be finding some outsourced group that can do that for you, and mostly thinking about the software for how you integrate with their overall inventory management system.
Yeah, exactly. And
then it's all about like, hey, each of these backpacks costs $10,000. We spend $3,000 making them, and we sell them to an end customer for $10,000 plus $100,000 store integration cost, and it costs us $25,000 to land $100,000 a year client.
So, I mean, I think the TLDR story here, which we've harped on before, is the lesson that Stefan really needs to learn is that you do need salespeople. You got criticized for this recently.
I asked a question about how to hire salespeople for robotics who aren't too stupid to understand robots, and the whole room decided I was an angry engineer who hated all salespeople, which felt uncomfortable for me.
Stefan was taking on my role. No, but honestly, we've talked about this a bit more. But if you're thinking of starting a robotics company or anything in the technical space, the first question you got to ask is the first thing you have to understand is that the technology has to be a tiny percentage of what you're actually building. Like everything else is what makes a company succeed.
Yep.
And I love technology. I'm always the most excited about that. That's the thing I want to do. But like, it has to be 5% of your effort, maybe 10.
To leave you with a closing thought on this. So a friend of mine, an investor of Polymaths, is often, he's kind of like a VC industry guy. He previously had a company where he's trying to help people raise money for their startups. He like pays a lot of attention to like what's trending in the VC world and this, that, and the other. And a complaint that he's independently thought of multiple times with us is that, like for a SaaS company, we've spent a lot of money before getting to $5 million before getting to $2 million of ARR. Like, yeah, man, you're forgetting that we have like a controls team and we have robotic software engineers and applications engineers, and we have a $150,000 tractor that sits somewhere that eats up fuel. And I think like realistically, there was this lovely grace period in robotics where you could blow $100 million before you get to $500,000 of revenue. There are still fraud companies that are achieving that are still able to live in that little world. But generally speaking, robotics companies have to meet normal metrics.
It's time to deliver.
Yeah.
It's time to deliver, and the grace period is over.
And if you're a vertical company, the whole thing has to be like, how do you get to north of $1 million of revenue before you need a Series A? How do you get to things that look like good
hopefully
metrics?
North of 2?
Yeah.
PS.
Yeah.
That's, insider details.
Yeah.
That's the real target these days. Considering inflation and that sort of thing. Like nobody's impressed with $1 million anymore.
So if you can only raise 3 to 5, how do you get to 2 million recurring revenue?
Yeah. That's the question. We figured that out, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's all solved.
Solved all problems.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about next week, Ilia?
Well, next week, neither one of us is traveling. So that's good news. So we might even have an episode.
Yep.
Maybe we talk about that topic I was talking about.
How it's hard to make a sensor on wheels company work.
Yeah. My and please, as a parting note, send your hate mail to KAI at Polymath Robotics.
I think there's a new one actually. It's EDDY at polymathrobotics.com is where to send all of your hate mail.
Yeah, send your hate mail. But my statement that I'll challenge all listeners is, show me one company that has, at all, by whatever metric you want to use for success, been successful by being sensors on wheels. So for security, for shelf checking, stock checking, for whatever. They don't touch anything. They're just sensors on wheels.
Part of why Ilia issues this challenge is a rising star, Cobalt Robotics, who is backed by Sequoia, had a really great team, was recently acquired by some dude, which was a bit of a bummer, given that on our side of the table, we thought that they were doing very well with sales, and being bought by some dude does not seem like that.
Yeah. So it led to the question of like, has there ever been an example of sensors on wheels being valuable?
Sensors on wheels that, to be fair, aren't pulling something.
That's what I'm saying. No interaction with physical objects.
Yep.
Not moving
They're
stuff.
not pushing dirt. They're not carrying things around.
Exactly. I have zero doubt that Amazon's robots that they use in their warehouses are valuable. I have zero doubt about that. You're saying
driving around looking at stuff.
I'm driving around looking at stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like maybe survey, but even that market, I have no idea how big it is.
And a number of the survey companies paint on the ground.
Yeah.
There's like 6 companies that paint layouts on the ground.
Layouts. Yeah.
So
but I'm saying yeah. So
spray paint's not a sensor.
Yeah. There are, everybody can name a few companies that are doing security robots or shelf checking or stock checking or whatever. But like,
who's been successful?
Any of them been actually successful?
Ilia's challenge, aka a broadside at least 25 companies. And with that, thank you all for joining us this week.
See you next time.